Okay, I'm excited to talk to you about your Enneagram results. First and foremost, I'm curious what resonated with you.
Really the opening question that I had is as I'm going through my packet, there were a lot
Yeah,
of pages on this one.
there are.
Um,
I have some favorites though. I can give you those favorites.
Good because
Yeah,
it really was a help me make sense of this.
sure.
There's just so much information,
Yes.
so many points though to where I thought, oh yeah, spot on. I mean that
Okay.
is exactly it, and it really does help me understand why do I, especially at work, why do I struggle with these certain things
Sure.
versus others, and so this definitely added more clarity to it. But again, there's a lot.
There's a lot here. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I love about the Enneagram. And that's also one of the things that's challenging about the Enneagram is there's so much there that essentially you're inviting someone on a path of lifetime self-discovery if they choose to take it. And then with you resonating as a five,
Yeah.
that's so much information and so much research and actually makes sense because we were talking about that other topic and you're like, well, I'll look into it. I'll look into it. And I thought like, oh, okay, like that's but of course you're gonna look into it because you scored as what do they call it? They call it the everybody has a different name for it. The quiet specialist, but others call it kind of the sage or just the desire to kind of process information and have the information. So in on the one hand, your reaction to these pages is probably like a gold mine. And also it's like, oh, there's a lot more for you to double click. But I think that that's part of, that's part of the fun of it, right? That's part of the journey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. I mean, I look at this and go, "Oh my gosh, I get so much that I get. Oh, I have so much that I need to look into." So
Sure.
yes, it's a problem.
Sure. So I will absolutely give you like a high level summary. I'll also make some recommendations about some places that you might want to double click on. You said that what you've reviewed thus far has a lot of resonance. Is there anything that didn't have resonance that I should be aware of?
You know, there wasn't anything as I looked through my notes of this, there wasn't anything that stood out where I'm like, "Oh, I completely disagree with that."
Okay.
But I think understanding the kind of some of the off I don't know how I'll say it, like the offshoots, where you're an Enneagram 5 with an SP instinct and
Sure.
your centers of expression, that kind of stuff. I don't know if I completely understood that, but otherwise, there wasn't anything I disagreed with. It was just a matter of what do I do with it, and
Yes.
the meaning behind that for me is this. So I am next in line to move up. My boss is retiring next year. So we've been focusing heavily on my development to go into that role. While it's not going to be a big change, it's going to be a big change.
Sure.
And so understanding where are my areas for development. And when I read this, especially as the quiet specialist, it makes me think about of this, what will be an advantage for me and what are
Hmm.
the things I really need to think about as I take that next step in my career because I worry about is this being the quiet person? I like to observe, I like to learn. Is that going to help me or hurt me
Mm.
in this next role?
Yeah. So my opinion on that, which you're going to have to hit the books and do your own research and create your own opinion on this because that's what the fives do. But my opinion on that is it's really about knowing what are you best at and what are you naturally strong at and then also how do you best leverage that to succeed in the environment that you're in.
Okay.
And some of even that worry or anxiety also makes sense because within the Enneagram, the fives are in the what's called head type. So that anxiety is prevalent. It's part of potentially what drives you towards more information, making sure you make the right decision. But I think we already discussed even in your previous session when we talked about different assessment results, is having you may have more information than other people do and you're not ready to move forward yet because you're still collecting information and other people potentially have already moved forward or that's more than they would have moving forward.
Okay.
So I think that's just something to know and be aware of as a five is the five's ability to analyze massive amounts of data, to be remarkably insightful, To have access to so much information is absolutely a strength. And, comma, that strength and overuse means if you're in an environment where you're having to make quick, uninformed, best guess decisions, I think one of the things I would validate you in is that your best guess decisions is likely grounded in a lot more information than someone else's. However, for myself, being in the instinctual type versus the head type, I potentially am more comfortable going with my gut.
Mm.
So, one of the things that we look at from the kind of offshoot perspective and the hope of doing the Enneagram is to really ground you in what does it mean to be a five? What are the strengths and what are the challenges of being a five? Because that's your core type. But then there are places of stretch and strain or release, or there's other tools that are potentially more kind of within your reach as a five that you can potentially lean into. So the beauty of that report is there's so much information there. But I think to kind of scaffold out your research, we'll start first with what it means to be a five. And then I'll do a little bit of a map for you. What does it mean to be a self-pres five? What does it mean to have lines to 7 and 8? What does it mean to have wings at 4 and 6? Like, but all of that, in my opinion, is icing. It's not cake. Now, some of the scholars who have come up with those things would disagree and be like, no, that is a separate cake and it is
Yeah.
just as important. But at least kind of from my knowledge and my experience, like grounding you in your core type is where you kind of always go back to. And there's a cool coaching session we can do, and we can do this kind of separately after we've talked about your results, where we actually move you through different aspects of the Enneagram, and it's kind of a fun, cool activity. So we can always have a follow up if that's helpful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so grounding you kind of first and foremost in the five, because I know fives are gonna want to double click. Some of my favorite resources for this. So the Beatrice Chestnut 9 Types of Leadership. What I really like about her book is that it's specifically focused on leadership. And then also each type gets a chapter. That's pretty normal in Enneagram books that each type gets a chapter. But then she'll also talk a little bit about your self-pres instinct. And you'll be able to, like, if your current boss has taken the test, you'll be able to read your current boss's chapter, if you have direct reports coming in, things like that. But I think that's just kind of I think it's kind of an easy guide to see how do your five tendencies show up in your leadership. And then when you have that information, you can then make better decisions about, is this serving me or not serving me?
What was the last name of the author?
Chestnut.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, Beatrice Chestnut, 9 Types of Leadership. And then because we were talking about podcasts, a podcast I recommend, it's called Sleeping at Last. And back in like 2019, 2020, around then, he did an episode on each type.
Hmm.
And so I do recommend the music may or may not be your type of music, but I thought it was really cool because he takes sounds and he brings in expertise, and it's just a different, because there's so many resources out there around the Enneagram. It can kind of be analysis paralysis. And what I find is the author's bias also goes into that. I mean, just our own experience with humans. What's cool though is you'll actually meet a lot of your fellow fives if you hit the books, because the fives are a lot of people like researched and documented the Enneagram. But the podcast episodes are like 60 to 90 minutes.
Okay.
And I would start with type 5. And then one of the things we'll talk about today are the other types that you kind of scored high in. Not high as in like, oh, the goal is to score high, but just the types that that may be of more resonance, or the things that you kind of want to turn on.
Great.
Yeah. Cool. So taking it from the top and kind of giving you kind of a summary. So one of the things that I get as a coach, and I'll just share my screen so you can see this. It's a lot of information. But I'll show you how you scored for the different types. And so as you look at it, 5 was your highest, but you also scored very high on 6. And then you have a number of other kind of pretty high scores. You have a lot of, with the exception of type one, you really scored, um, I would say balanced or well integrated, which is actually, that you're kind of, you're able to kind of call on and have at your disposal those different resources. So one of the things to think about there's is that, in the spirit of the Enneagram, you have a core type, so the quiet specialist, and then the types next to you are your potential wing choices. And I'll go in a little bit more into the history because you scored as a five, you may like the history better. Historically, you would just pick one wing, and you'd be like, "Oh, I'm a five with a six wing." And for you, this is actually very close. But at the same time, what the integrative Enneagram says is that, you need both wings to fly. What I say is, like, one of your neighbors has sugar and one has spice, so it's good to have access to both of them. So for you, likely that kind of analysis that focused on knowledge and gaining knowledge also is gaining knowledge to mitigate risk. And you may have to kind of manage a frankly a bit of an anxiety spiral, just because you have such a good talent for looking at information, mitigating and assessing risk. But then, in you know the sevens are kind of like, let's think about all the possibilities, and the sixes tend to be, let's think about all the things that could go wrong. And
Mhm.
so, because you're already analyzing all the data, and you're looking at all the things that could go wrong, and do I trust this person, do I not trust this person, what's the likelihood of this outcome, and things like that. That gives you kind of that double click, double dose of the kind of analytical perspective. So one of the pages, I think it's 13, so you're probably either like 13 or 26. One of the pages is your potential wings, and one of them is your lines. So it will talk to you a little bit about what's a healthy integration of type six, what's an unhealthy integration of type six, and then it'll also talk about the healthy or unhealthy integrations of type four. Any questions coming up for you before I talk a little bit about your less expressed wing?
No, this makes a lot of sense, and I think understanding the 6 and the 4 as you've described it, it really, like I said, it puts a lot into perspective, and it's like, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. So as you go over to the sixth wing, you have the depth of analysis. Let's analyze all of these possibilities. The best case scenario for the sixth is for them to really tap into their own kind of inner knowing and knowledge. So that's something to think about is, as a five with that strong sixth wing, you're gathering so much information. As a five, even the quote unquote right answer will only be the right answer until more data is revealed. It's like what we learned in school versus what people are learning in school now. It's not the same planets and it's not the same dinosaurs, right? Because the science and the new information. So you likely have a piece with that. And so sometimes also thinking about the application in your leadership role, and as you go into a new leadership role, kind of how are you going to make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time, knowing that as you continue to evolve and grow, that information is going to change. So food for thought on that. So the Enneagram is divided into triads. We have the head types, the body types, and the heart types. And there's no quiz on this. We can geek out more if you want to. But your other wing option goes into the heart type. It goes into the four. So there's an intensity in the four, an intensity of the emotion. Fours are more comfortable also in the kind of darker emotions because of the authenticity, the realness, and also the creativity that comes from that. So this is less expressed. It's actually one of your least expressed numbers, and that's fine. Your goal is not to change or move any of these bars unless you really want to. It's just kind of knowing what your options are. But as you look at the wing page, looking at, if and when, especially if you're feeling stuck on something, is there an opportunity for you to leverage your creativity? Or if and when you're in analysis paralysis and you're not getting the data you need, or the data you need just doesn't quote unquote feel right, can you tap into your emotions that way and get that more kind of intuitive, creative, visual data to balance out your natural quest for data as a five?
Yeah.
How's that resonating?
Yeah, I think it resonates really well, and I'm thinking of examples of where, this has kind of come to life, and in some of those cases, it's been almost confusing to a point.
Sure.
Kind of a what is this versus, again, especially with six, that's just so it's just very spot on.
Sure.
Place a significant value in trust and using my experience to decide, is this someone I can trust? What's their intention? What is their motivation? And so I have those around me who can say, chill out with that, right? This is a good person, right? You just need to get to know them. And one of the things that I had noted.
But Jason, that's also part of your process. And honestly, that's going to remain part of your process. So just knowing that that's part of your process and leaning into that. And then
Mhm.
also with type 6, they say that everything you say about the type 6, that the opposite is also true. There's a
Mm.
way, there's a kind of a built-in contradiction. So for you, as you're researching, or if you pick up that book or you listen to the podcast, because you scored so close in 6, and so there was a point of, even of when you took this assessment, where it was feeding you 5 questions and 6 questions, and it was trying to split the difference to
Mm.
decide if you were 5 or 6. You may want to, those may want to be the next chapters that you read.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. There was something else that came to mind for you.
Yes. So one thing that I noticed, and this was actually a question mark, is unsentimental for the quiet specialist, and it says you
Mm,
approach life in a realistic way and put emotions aside when needed. One of the criticisms that I often get is you show no emotion.
mm,
You take things very matter of fact. Things don't tend to, or at least outwardly, things don't, you're just very kind of passive with things because it's what it is, right? And we just move on with that. That one stood out to me because I don't know what to do with that.
mhm. Is it something you want to change?
Yes, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know because it makes that behavior, that response is very comfortable for me. It makes a
Mhm,
lot of sense. I prefer to look at things as a matter of fact. They are what they are. There's no sense in getting worked up over good, bad, all that other kind of stuff, right? But the reason I say I don't know is because there's an element there of the perception of others. Whether or not that's a good reason to want to make a change, it is something um, that is present. And again, I don't know what to do with that. So I don't know if I just say, ah, let that thought just go, right? It doesn't matter. You are who you are and just, kind of go with that. Or no, actually, maybe I should, but I don't know what to change or what to work towards because
mhm,
being outwardly emotional or being this, that's just not me.
mhm. Yeah. Well, and I think so, should's a four-letter word in coaching, right? We don't necessarily want you to focus on like what you should do.
Sure.
I think that's an excellent note for a potential topic to explore.
Mhm.
So, and that's really one of the things that the Enneagram brings out, and that's a potential area to explore. What I'll offer on that is that changing someone's experience of you is not the same as changing yourself. Because what I'm hearing, and some of this is through kind of my Enneagram lens, is I'm hearing that if someone wants you to quote unquote be more emotional, it's likely because they are emotional. And so they're looking for that resonance. That's an interesting thing. There's a, as we look at diversity, and they're the kind of like me bias. if Jason's not freaking out, is Jason not with me? But in reality, you're kind of authentic. It is what it is. We're going to just deal with this situation that very much matches your style. So I think one of the things that I like to do is look at what's another road to get you there. And one of the things to think about, and we can talk about that, is one of the lines that fives integrate are seven. And sevens are good at looking at the abundance of opportunities available. So if we tap into your ability to look at, okay, people are giving you this information, they want you to, quote, be more emotional. You haven't decided if that's something that you want to do, though it's not necessarily in your comfort zone or on your to-do list. One of the things to look at and kind of tapping into the seven is like, what's a way to get there that's not just being more emotional? So considering how you create capacity for other people's emotion, considering a way that you respond to people in emotional states so they feel heard and seen without you having that emotional reaction. Because as we think about even what coaching is, our clients are upset most, maybe not most of the time, depending on, what field, but like our clients bring us all their vulnerable stuff. If we were reacting to all their vulnerable stuff, like how could we serve them as coaches, right? Our ability to stay calm, to stay objective. What if you looked at that in a different way? What's the benefit of that situation? These are actually things that are a benefit to the coaching practice. So I think that's a whole other conversation. I think that's a great conversation. And I think you have some choices there for if you choose to develop in that area, how you want to develop.
That really resonated, especially when you reference the like me bias. And I think so much of it too, even my own professional growth and personal growth as well, is, when you are in these executive positions, there's a lot of judging, there's a lot of connection, there's a lot of all of that. And those are things that I've always said I don't like. That's just not me, right? However, so what that did for me was really clarified. It's not that I need to change, it's the capacity piece. Is that I need to be more responsive to how individuals are, instead of, because I know I will do this when somebody's emotional, when they're mad, when they're whatever. I'm just like, no,
Mhm.
no, I'm not doing that. So, but I do believe that an area of growth is how I respond, in those situations. So that capacity piece really resonated with me.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, so what I love so much about assessments is because I'm all about how do leaders or how do people be even better at how they are. And a lot of times people don't know how they are because we just think we're normal. Or
Mhm.
if we're fours, we think we're not normal. But like, we think we're normal and we can't necessarily see it. So I think the thing is that five's primary style and strategy is what's called withdrawn. You also scored high. One of the things we'll talk about is like how you're kind of tri type, so to speak. In your tri type, you also scored as other types who are more likely to be withdrawn. So, what's happening in these emotional situations is you're going to the five's default strategy to not get involved and to
Mhm.
not like go into the chaos. The answer is not necessarily for you to lean into that chaos of someone else's emotional up and downs, but it's for you to assess, does my primary strategy of withdrawing serve me in this moment? And leaning on your ability to be analytical and calm to also say, is this a moment where I choose to employ a different strategy? And that's very five language. If I was talking to a heart type, I'd be like, what feels right? Right. If I was talking to an instinct type,
Yeah.
I'd be like, what's your gut say? Because the thing is that on the instinct type, they can feel it. You have most of, with the exception of the head types, you have the other types driven on feeling, whether that feeling is coming from the heart or whether that feeling is coming from the gut. There's that strong movement of feeling. Not so for the head types. There's a natural kind of sense of analysis. So I think you have your primary strategies. Our primary strategies serve us most of the time. What you want to look at probably is the arc and kind of hit the books and do the analysis. of when do you think your primary strategy didn't serve you, and what's another strategy you've seen be effective. Because I will just say for myself, in the midst of someone's emotion and chaos, I'll just acknowledge it to be like, hey, there's a lot here, and I recognize that this is upheaval. Does this feel like a moment you want to talk about what's next, or does this feel like we should pause here? And just like granting that pause, and I actually like reinforce my calm. And
Mm,
I did have a client that I wasn't a match for because they were so urgent. A lot of times people like my calm, but being so urgent, sometimes if you are not urgent, they think you're not listening or that you don't care.
mhm.
Other times when we calmly, and this is where our predictive index comes in, because you and I both score on that kind of calm versus urgent side. Other times when we kind of calmly walk into a situation, people are like, oh, thank goodness, because it was too hot in here.
Mm,
So it's just kind of one of the things how you hold space for people as a coach and how you hold space for people as a leader and also as a person. Those may be different methods. And as you're trying on this new leadership role, that's some of what you're kind of collecting data about.
yeah.
And that's your process and your style. As a five, you're going to collect that data. As someone who, scores with the C on the right for predictive index, you're going to do that in a very kind of calm, and then your B on the left, that kind of calm analytical way. So a lot of when I work with leaders, challenges is in their organization, a leader looks a certain way. And so they're like, how do I get to that? How
Mm.
do I be that extrovert sales leader? And it's like, no, no, no. How do we get, and this is, and so then this is not a shocker, being a strengths based coach or focusing on positive psychology. It's like, no, from a diversity perspective, we need all those leadership types. So it's just kind of how do you make space for the people who have emotions without feeling like you have to be emotional yourself?
You struck a chord there for me because
Good.
my boss and I are very different. He's
Yes.
very outgoing. He's very social and people oriented. And I look at what he does and I'm like, that's not me. And I've even asked a question if our chancellor wants that, I'm
Hmm.
not the guy. That's
Hmm.
just not me because that's not who I am. And that's been a worry of mine, right? Because
Sure.
it's like, well, I want the opportunity, but I'm going to approach it different.
Yeah.
So yeah, you
And that's
really,
what diversity is.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me that as a five and a six, you're worried about what if this, and also just like as someone who's aspiring and moving up to the next level of leadership, of course, you're asking those normal questions about, I don't know if this is right for me, or I don't know what's next for me. So that's all normal. And one of the things I think that you should research and work with your boss on, if you are not going to be like, let's say hypothetically, your boss is a seven, right? Which is like honestly as like rah rah and social and let's drive everybody towards this vision as the Enneagram types get. So then thinking about what's going to be missing that you think should be included, and then where are the other places, whether it's vendor outsource, whether it's who you hire, whether it's creating systems and processes while you're both still working together so that these things can kind of run themselves. Who else in your org or department can potentially kind of wear this hat so that if it's a critical need, that those critical needs are being met, but that you're not feeling like, oh, I have to become this person in order to lead.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Okay. So one of the things I want to talk to you a little bit about is, and this is, well, I guess here's my inclination. I want to give you a couple pages or concepts to like double click on just so you have a deeper understanding of your report. That's my instinct. But is there somewhere else that you would like to go in this discussion?
Yeah, thank you. I'm right on with you. I think that would be really helpful for me.
Okay. Okay. So one of the things I'm going to do is just kind of at a high level. explain some of the other key concepts that are in the report. So the first one is, and I'll share my screen again. So the first one is there's something, one of the kind of scholarly offshoots of the Enneagram is what's called tri-type, which in the integrative Enneagram, they talk about as kind of feeling, like thinking, feeling, and action styles. So one of the things it does is looks at, you are most likely to think about something, not surprising, as a 5.
Mhm.
Then you'll take action, and then those feelings, as you've already articulated, comes up next. So in the spirit of aim, fire, ready, the feelings for you are the least expressed. And so the goal is not, you don't have to change the order of those, but I think it's very like kudos to you and your self awareness that you have already acknowledged. Hey, sometimes I need to make space for the feelings. I think one of the things for you to consider though is, in addition to making space for other people's feelings, potentially making space for your own feelings. Because, oh, what's interesting, your highest score in the feeling type is type 3, and the 3s are so focused on achievement, they don't usually people can't usually sense what they're feeling. So that's another thing to think about as well, like in the spirit of your tri-type, which is basically like, what's your highest of the thinking, which is type 5? What's your highest of the feeling? It was type 3. Your type 2 is right there though. So like you have that warmth. You have that warmth accessible, but the accessible warmth is likely for home Jason and outside of work Jason, because you scored as a 3, that kind of that competitive achiever you're very focused on, and you probably have a work mode. And then your highest on the body type or the instinct is type 9. And 9s are so good at reading the room and reading other people and what other people need, that a lot of times people aren't aware of what they need. So in a way, your tri-type, so to speak, is kind of it's almost like a triple threat of, what is Jason feeling? We don't know. So that has likely served you in your career. And also it seems like it's coming up now as something for you to potentially like take a look at and think about. What I would create space for though is, how do you create space for your own feelings and the information that those give you? It's less about everyone else feeling comfortable with your leadership style, in my opinion. But that's also, I'm an 8, so that's how we roll. So, what this looks like when we think about center of expression is, you think like a 5. You're going to get all the information. You're going to look at the data sources. If someone can present you with a data source that has more information, that's great. You're going to double down, double click. One of the greatest gifts to 5s is more information. I have, my best friend is a 5, and it's so fun. She's taken every single assessment that I offer. She just wants all of the information, and she'll read the science guides, and she'll double click on the website to like get more information, because you just, it's like candy to the 5. Like the information's like candy to the 5. So you're going to think about all those things. When you take action, you're going to take action in a way that serves the group. You're going to take in other people's feelings and experiences into account. So that may be a way that the feelings kind of come in, is that the 9s are always scanning and seeking, because they're trying to keep the peace, they're trying to hold the peace. And in order to keep and hold the peace, you have to understand what's happening in the room. You have to understand people's experience. So that's probably your thoughts, then align with action. And then the feelings for you, 3s aren't particularly in touch with their feelings. That's one of the challenges of the type. They are often so focused on achievement and being the best that they can be. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what they actually want. So that's usually work they have to do to be like, what do you actually want? So it does make sense. Also being male, also depending on your background and things like that, some of this may even be like social conditioning, but the calm, cool, collected, not kind of very emotionally expressive. that's not a bad thing. Those are strengths for you, but I think it's good that you're analyzing the blind spots.
Yeah, there's just so many stories that you're
Mhm.
bringing up, and I think to answer that one, so I started my professional career in law enforcement. So my
There you
upbringing
go.
professionally was very much this way, where you have to be calm, cool, collected,
Yep.
always thinking about the risks, always thinking about option A, B, C, D, E, F, and that's actually been a struggle a lot of times because I like options. I like being able to think, what if? What if this happens?
Mhm.
What if that happens? Um, and that's I struggle sometimes with teams because just give me a plan and let's go. And I'm like, yeah, but we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this, or we could
Mhm.
do this. And in that has created tension at times. But
Sure.
yeah, this as you're talking about this, my what I would consider my, real personal professional development started in law enforcement.
Okay. So I think that's great awareness as well. So you of course want all the information and you want all of the options. To your team, it's it's too much of your type of fuel.
Mm,
So we as leaders tend to, in the spirit of the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. And the idea is that it actually needs to be the platinum rule, treat others how they want to be treated. So a lot of times, like, unless you're surrounded by other fives, it's unlikely that they won't get overwhelmed with the quantity of information that you think is fun.
yeah. I like how you
So,
said fun.
yeah. So have the books and the podcasts and the research and stuff like that. Have that, but also know that kind of your team may need to be informed once you've drilled that down a bit. And you do want to need to have those safe places to process. But usually fives like to process with their information on their own anyway. So when you do feel ready to come forward, of course you want to see, and this is where your nine comes out. You're like, how do we take the action that best serves the group?
Mhm.
How do we make sure we're doing the thing that takes care of everybody's needs? So it makes sense that you're revealing that out, but I think some of that, especially as you move from being kind of second into command into that leadership role, kind of who and how you process information, sometimes that may be too much information for other people.
So what you're saying is that some people may not enjoy when they ask a question and it turns into all of that? Is that what we're saying here?
I think it's just being, there's a way when someone asks me a question and I can give them a concise answer, that's
Yeah.
one thing. When someone asks me a question and I need to verbally process and think through all the options, the way my mind and mouth work, it can be kind of, I've seen the deer in the headlights look. And so I've even learned to say, like, hey, bear with me. I'm going to process this for a minute and I'm going to get to an answer at the end. Because I just kind of over the years, I watched my direct reports be kind of overwhelmed by the storm. And
Yeah.
I may need to go through the storm to get them to the answer that they're looking for. And over time, I don't have to do that as often. But at the same time, I have the awareness if I need to think about and process something in the moment, it's a lot of words and it's moving really fast. And the people who are most successful at that, honestly, are the people who aren't trying to go with me, but who will pick me up when I'm like, here's the summarized answer.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
it's just having that knowledge and awareness of how you process who and what helps you in the process. It's the kind of in the spirit of kind of it's optimizing your own patterns. So
Mhm.
I say, like, if you know what your patterns are, you can optimize them. A lot of the work we do in coaching is for people about optimization. You hitting the books and looking at all the options and looking all the variants of options, that's not only fun for you, that's probably part of your process to make the best decisions. But then I think if you're making decisions collectively with others, having them analyze how they make decisions so that you can also make sure that you're bringing them in at the moments that are most impactful. And some people are like, no, 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 transparency. But the thing is that like we all process in different ways and we use different data sets to process. So, me confusing the heck out of my direct reports, that doesn't help them. It's
Yeah.
much cleaner if I've done some pre-processing. And thankfully, I can use that language to say, like, hey, can you just sit with me for a minute? Because I need to process this through. So I've learned how to even language it so that I can get what I need, or that's what I have a coaching session for. And then I'm able to kind of have a cleaner delivery.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. So, one of the things in the report, just because I think this is helpful visual, type 5 naturally connects to it, has wing choices of 4 and 6. So, there's a page in your report. I used to have them memorized. I swear, I think it's 13 and 26. So, one of the pages about the wings, and it shows you kind of positive and negative integration of 4 and 6. So, that's something to think about, not a have to. 4 is your least expressed on the Enneagram. So that's just it's not the goal here is not for you to express it more. It's just for you to know it's right there if you need it. So if and when you do go emotional, if it gets really dark, that might just be your 4. So sometimes the creative outlets can help because for you emotions tend to be like calm, grounded. How do we make the best of the situation? How do we make sure we get out of this alive? Speaking of law enforcement,
Hmm.
as fives integrate, so some people talk about this as like a three-legged stool. Each Enneagram type is connected to 2 other types. Some believe that we pick up some in strain and some in release, like that there's almost like a good side and like a not good side. But if you look at it from an Enneagram perspective, both of these have pros and cons. So one of the other pages to explore is how do you tap into your 8, that decisive gut oriented leadership, that knowing when enough information is enough and you can just go ahead and pull the trigger, break some eggs because that's how omelets are made. And then also when you can lean into your 7 and you can look at what is the abundance of possibilities, how do we make this fun, what are our options, that freedom to choose. And so just kind of exploring that a little bit. So those are, but if and when it gets overwhelming, just go back to the 5. So we always like the core type, knowing what's happening in your neighborhood, so to speak,
Yeah.
is fine, but you want to kind of be aware of and have knowledge about what's happening in your own house. As far as the instincts, so some people really kind of double click and lean onto this. For you scored highest as self pres, then which is, how do you make sure the needs are met? This is not shocking, also law enforcement. You're probably someone who has like a multi tool handy first aid kit, snacks. Like there's a lot of focus on if you have a big meeting in the morning, what time are you going to go to bed? For self preses, they usually have a awareness of their own needs and make sure that they also have resources available so that their own needs can be met. Is that resonating?
100%.
Okay. So when you move around, when you move to the wings or when you move to the lines, your instinct will not change. So if you start doing research about self-pres 5, know that the self-pres 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 3, like it's your instinct likely, it can change with major life situations, and you scored pretty close on the 1-to-1, but you're likely to hold that as you move around the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So the 1-to-1 is the kind of intensity of connection. So likely when you have a trusted source or a trusted relationship, you will, if they've gone through your kind of more extensive vetting process and you have, and you can trust them that the kind of relationship and investment with this person and taking care of this other person is not going to sacrifice your own needs,
Mhm.
you're likely to really have that kind of depth and intensity in the relationship. You're not probably a surface chit chat, small talk guy. Exactly. You're probably
Yeah.
capable of it based
Sure.
on, life in and having lived in the American South. It's
Yeah.
capable, but it's not like it feeds you or enriches you.
Yeah. If I
The
need to, I
social
will, but
Sorry,
otherwise,
say again.
I was gonna say if I need to, I will, but
Yeah.
other, I'm not gonna go to that.
Yeah, exactly. The social instinct is not just a social desire to interact with people. It's also looking at the power dynamics and what's happening kind of in the room. So, for example, I, as an 8 social, am very focused on, not surprisingly, I'm focused on the power. A 5 social may be more focused on, how do you give the information to create the most social good? So, the
Mm.
creator of this assessment is a 5 social. So, it's just kind of as we look at this, and you'll see the more, if you want to kind of lean in and geek out to the instincts, I would stay. My recommendation is always stay more in the core type. There's a lifetime of information in the core type, but also know that there are these different offshoots that cause deepening, so you can kind of follow your nose. A couple quick things just before we wrap up. So, one of the things we look at is the how you get what you want. Fives are likely to be withdrawn, and then less likely to kind of go along or assert. But one of the things I talked about with, those strategies, when people are having that emotional state, of course, you're like, ooh, I'm going to just stay back here. I'm going to let that calm down. So that's your default strategy. But knowing that kind of the assertive or compliant can be others, you're likely to make the most of a challenging situation and just kind of navigate your way through it. You've done research, you've analyzed the options. How do we get through this? But then knowing that positive outlook and reactive or other choices. So I think what I like looking at as far as, these are the Hornedian and the harmonics are, a lot of people don't even get that deep in the double click. The main takeaway I would say from this is you're likely in any challenging situation to be withdrawn, to step back and say, if we hit the books and get more information about this, we're going to make a better decision. And you're likely in the face of conflict to just figure out, okay, well, how do we get through this and how do we focus? When you're working with someone else, so for example, if you're working with someone who's assertive, asking for what they want as well as reactive, that person is coming at you with a different set of default strategies, and whether you're managing them or they're your stakeholder or you're working with them, kind of being aware of or having knowledge of when our primary strategy doesn't work, thinking about the diversity of our toolkit.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the stress and strain profile does not have anything to do with the Enneagram. That's just part of how, or in my opinion, does not have anything to do with the Enneagram. It's just part of how we as coaches can double click down and say, hey, these came up as green, these came up as yellow, these came up as red, anything that's helpful for us to talk here. So it's just because the assessment's looking at whole person in addition to as the Enneagram.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know that's a lot of information. There's a lot of places you can go.
Yeah.
Curious what your takeaways are as we close.
Well, I imagine that you'd be able to guess what my next steps are going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I've got a lot to dive into, but again, what I appreciate so much about this is it's one more perspective. It's one more way to look at and understand who I am, especially as a leader, but as an individual. And I think, for me professionally, because I've made the career change, right? I've gone from law enforcement to teaching, now to professional development, coaching, et cetera. And that requires different things. And, one thing I noticed, and I don't know the meaning to it, but you saw happy is 100. And yeah, I'm really happy. I am
That's awesome.
absolutely doing what I love to do, and I love going to work every single day. And so, as I continue to grow and as I continue to have more of an impact, it's important for me to understand, who I am as a leader, as an individual, so that I can have the most confidence moving forward. So again, this is so helpful to be, oh yeah, this makes sense, and here's some strategies that I can focus on. So yeah, but I know I'll also have a lot more questions, and
Yeah.
I'll be following up with you on
Yeah,
this.
absolutely. Well, and it's we're linked. We have a line between us. So 8 and 5 are linked. So kind of the hitting the books and then how that changes your confident action. That's, even, I mean, obviously we can follow up even if there's not that line there, but the more we do follow up, it feeds, it's one of our natural kind of coping strategies, for us to move towards each other's type. And I'm always happy to share more. And to me, from a leadership perspective and from a coaching perspective, I'm all about grounding people in who they are, how they lead, what their businesses look like. And so what I think is fun about assessments, as long as they agree with the assessments and the assessments resonate with them, is that then they get to explore as much as they want, kind of what does that even mean?
Mhm. Very good.
Okay, great. Great.
Awesome.
Well, have some fun with this, and I'm happy to have a follow-up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all this
Yeah,
insight.
absolutely.